Hi, welcome to End Credit Reviews, and House of Dracula is criminally underrated. House of Dracula is a horror movie from 1945. It was directed by Earl C. Kenton, who previously directed the Monster Mash movie House of Frankenstein. It stars Lon Chaney Jr., John Carradine, Glenn Strange, Onslow Stevens, Martha O'Driscoll, and Jane Addams. It's a movie that even till this very day isn't highly regarded as some of the other movies at that time. I personally believe that deserves more positive attention. It was also the last serious Monster Mash movie by Universal Studios until Van Helsing over 50 years later. As much as I enjoy the other Monster Mash movies of that time, I personally believe that this movie was a satisfying conclusion to that horror cycle. So before I begin, I want to make a few statements. First is that this is an analyzation, not a review, so there will be spoilers throughout. Second is that just because I think this movie is underrated doesn't mean I won't point out some things that I might have not liked about it. And finally, this is a copyright disclaimer. This means that I do not own any of the video, audio, or music footage from this movie. So without further ado, here is why I think House of Dracula is criminally underrated. The movie opens up to Dracula, played by John Carradine, paying a visit to Dr. Edelman, played by Onslow Stevens, late at night. He tells the doctor that he is a vampire and wishes to be freed of being one himself.
You asked me to believe that. That's why I've come to you. To seek release from a curse of misery and horror against which I'm powerless to fight alone. Your reputation for helping others made me certain that you would. You could effect a cure.
Now this sort of adds a bit of depth to the character of Dracula as a person. Nowadays, Dracula is more of a complex character in terms of personality, but this does harken back to what the character said in 1931.
To die, to be really dead, that must be glorious.
The doctor decides to run a blood test on Dracula with his lovely assistant nurse Nina, played by Jane Addams, but she turns out to be a hunchback. Hey, if guys can look past Megan Fox's weird thumbs or even Marianne Cotillard's forehead mole, I mean come on, just snip that thing, then I can look past that hump. Dracula returns the next night and is greeted by another one of the nurses named Milza, played by Martha O'Driscoll. The doctor then gives Dracula some information.
An examination of your blood reveals the presence of a peculiar parasite, a form with which I'm completely unfamiliar.
Now the biggest criticism of this movie is that they give scientific explanations to the supernatural characters.
That's a serious problem I have with this movie. The werewolf transformation should have been kept supernatural instead of giving it a scientific explanation.
I've honestly never found any issue with this, especially since science has been in many of these movies for quite some time.
You never wanted to look beyond the clouds and the stars, or to know what causes the trees to bud, and what changes the darkness into light?
He then gets another visitor named Larry Talbot, played by Lon Chaney Jr., who for some reason now has a mustache. I know it makes continuity weird, but I'm willing to let it slide as long as they don't try to do a Justice League. After giving his own assessment, he also tells Larry of his own condition.
The examination discloses one condition: pressure upon certain parts of the brain. This condition, coupled with your belief that the moon can bring about a change, accomplishes exactly that.
Again, saying that as part of his mind isn't anything out of place for these movies. Something similar was applied in Dracula's Daughter, where she was seeing an expert if she really was a vampire, or if it was all in her head as a mental delusion. But Larry is impatient and tries to kill himself. The doctor goes after him at night, but Larry turns into a werewolf. Luckily for him, he turns back to normal in the nick of time. One issue that I do have with this movie that I do agree with others on is the lack of screen time that the Wolfman has. This was because they were running low on yak hair that they would use, so this limited the transformation scenes in the movie. What is even more convenient is that they find the Frankenstein monster, played by Glenn Strange, in the cave beneath the house.
That must be the skeleton of Dr. Naaman, who revitalized him years ago. The villagers drove them into the swamp. They went down in the quicksand. For all these years, The Mondas brought them here.
They bring the monster back up to the lab, and Aelmon is tempted to harness the power of the monster, but Nina reasons with him.
That helpless body is man's responsibility.
Man's responsibility is to his fellow man.
Night comes and Dracula meets Milza in the best scene in the movie. I love this scene for many reasons. 1. It makes great usage of Beethoven's song Moonlight Santa. Then the song changes to show how Dracula is trying to use his hypnotic powers.
I've never heard this music before, yet I'm playing it.
You're creating it. For me.
2nd, John Carradine is a great Dracula in his own right. When I was a kid, I didn't like him as Dracula simply because he wasn't Bela Lugosi, but he does look more like how Bram Stoker described him in his book, and his acting is pretty great in this one, especially with him having a lot more screen time than he did in the previous movie, where he felt more inconsequential to that story, so he was able to shine in this one. 3rd, the cinematography is excellent, especially showing the candles near him as if they are like a devil's pitchfork. And that goes double for all the shots to showcase how Larry feels like a prisoner with the curse that he has. But she has another man in her life, and Dracula backs off. The nurses work away on a cure for the monsters when Milza decides to walk up the stairs in a strange way. Nina follows because she is suspicious. Let's say she's got a hunch. She sees that Dracula has hypnotized Milza, and she goes to warn her doctor. They foil Dracula's plan and they try to run another test, but Dracula is overwhelming a cure and double-crosses Adelmon. He then hypnotizes Nina in a simple but effective effect shot that shows her falling asleep. So this is what it's like going through the nursing program. Dracula then injects his blood into Adelmon and tries to get with Milza, but Nina wakes up and the rest of the characters try to stop Dracula. Adelmon opens Dracula's coffin and killing him with sunlight, but then he feels strange and his reflection disappears. He develops a split personality and fantasizes about using his power to heal Nina, but to harness the power of the Frankenstein monster while also rewatching clips from Bride of Frankenstein. Going back to normal, Adelmon wants to use the cure, but there is only enough for one. He wants to use it on Nina, but she insists on giving it to Larry instead.
Then you must operate on Mr. Talbot. The moon will be full in a few days. We can't let him suffer again.
But you've waited such a long time.
Then I can wait a little longer.
Nina is such a great person. Despite her deformity, she is extremely kind, is the voice of reason when needed, and she sacrifices her chance to be normal just to help a tormented soul like Larry. The other hunchback assistants in the previous movies were either dicks or power-hungry and coveting Frankenstein's creation, but Nina is the best one. Although the one from House of Frankenstein did have some good in him, he did kill innocent people and took his jealous frustrations out on the monster. It seemed like hunchbacks could only go up in terms of being good people in these movies until they hit a brick wall with this one.
Yes, master. Why do you torment that thing so?
It's what I do.
Remember, Igor, do unto others
before they do unto me.
They then apply the cure to Larry, and Adelmon goes into his Mr. Hyde phase. He kills someone, and he is chased by the nearby townfolk. Adelmon gets back home and goes back to normal. Time goes by, and Larry confronts the sight of the full moon to show he is freed of the curse. This is nothing short of satisfying. After being tormented through many of these movies that he wished for death, he gets to be free to live his life. But then Adelmon turns evil again and resurrects the monster. The police show up to stop them, and the villagers are not too far behind.
I don't like people who see what they're not supposed to see.
That was so painfully delayed that it could give Batgirl some competition.
I quit.
Robin, wait.
I don't like people who break their promises, Mr. Talbot.
I know it's a minor moment, but I do think it does make some things come full circle. Larry killed a monster who was a tormented man at his core, so killing Adelmon in an act of mercy is very fitting. But the monster causes the house to burn down in a rushed ending to where they recycle shots from the Ghost of Frankenstein. While the ending is a bit abrupt and cheap, and it was disappointing to see the Frankenstein monster still used as a plot device, I think that this movie was a satisfying end to the Universal monster movies at that time. It gave closure to Larry Talbot, John Carradine was able to shine as Dracula this time, and the Hunchback assistant was made out to be more of a good person instead of being a monster. So that is why I think House of Dracula is criminally underrated. So anyway, thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe.